Some deeply worrying things are, as always, happening in the world. However bad it is, we have an additional complication. What we call the news is really a business that understands that you can't make money by telling people that things are, on balance, going to be okay. The point of the news is to make money by scaring us, and it does this brilliantly. But we need an antidote, and we can find it in a resource that's on hand to remind us that difficulties aren't new, that troubles can be survived, and that it has in fact been a lot worse than this before. It's an antidote we call history. When political events seem to have reached a new low, we might, for example, turn to the writings of the ancient Roman historian Suetonius. Born towards the end of the 1st century AD, Gaius Suetonius Tranquillus was an imperial administrator and chief secretary to the Emperor Hadrian. He was the first historian to try to give an accurate portrait of what the rulers of the empire, from Julius Caesar down to Domitian, had actually been like. It's a shocking story. Suetonius's book amounts to a catalogue of extraordinary follies and crimes of the first 12 men to rule the Western world. Among them, Julius Caesar, who emerges as a thief, a liar, an egomaniac, and a murderer. Caligula, a notorious psychopath who, to quote Suetonius, sent people down the mines or threw them to wild beasts or confined them in narrow cages where they had to crouch or were sawn in half, not for major offences, but because they didn't properly admire a show he had sponsored at the circus or didn't refer with sufficient respect to his genius. Suetonius tells us that the method of execution he preferred was to inflict numerous small wounds, but avoiding all major organs. He often gave the command, "Make them feel they are dying." Then came Nero. Of him we hear, he dressed himself in the skins of wild animals and attacked the private parts of men and women bound to stakes. He wandered through the streets at night, randomly murdering strangers and throwing their bodies into the sewers. Afterwards it was the turn of Vitellius. His ruling vices were gluttony and cruelty. He banqueted 3 or 4 times a day and survived by taking frequent emetics. He used to give himself a treat by having prisoners executed before his eyes. Then it was time for Domitian. At the beginning of his reign, we hear, Domitian would spend hours alone every day catching flies and stabbing them with a needle-sharp pen. He wasn't any nicer to his own people. Though Suetonius writes about grotesque individuals, who were also at the time the most powerful people on the planet, reading him can leave one feeling remarkably serene. One might read him tucked up in bed after news of the latest election win. The experience is strangely reassuring, because it's at heart a narrative of resilience. Suetonius writes about earthquakes, plagues, wars, riots, rebellions, conspiracies, betrayals, coups, terrorism and mass slaughter. Considered on their own, this might seem to be the record of a society whose collapse must surely be imminent. But in fact, Suetonius was writing before and not after the most impressive period of Roman achievement, which would come 50 years later under the rule of the Stoic philosopher and emperor Marcus Aurelius. The disasters that Suetonius catalogues were compatible with a society heading overall towards peace and prosperity. Reading Suetonius suggests that it isn't fatal for societies to be in trouble. It is in fact usual for things to go rather badly. In this respect, reading ancient history generates the opposite emotions to scanning today's news. Events have been much worse before, and things were, in the end, okay. People behaving very badly is a normal state of affairs. There have always been existential threats to the human race and to civilization. It makes no sense and is a form of twisted narcissism to imagine that our own era has any kind of monopoly on idiocy. By reading Suetonius, we enter unconsciously into his less agitated and more stoic responses. He and history more generally encourage us to access what we need now more than ever, the less panicky, more resilient sides of ourselves.